Acts chapter 2. Will you go to Acts chapter 2? This is where we were last week in our study, and this morning again we're in Acts chapter 2. And here we find the birth of the church and the pattern of the church as to how we are to function and how we are to operate as a body of believers. You could say that the early New Testament church is a template for us to follow today. In our last message, we focused our attention on verse 44. Look at those first 6 words in verse 44. And all that believed were, what's the word? Together. All that believed were together. But today we turn our attention to verse 46. Look, please, at Acts chapter 2, verse 46. And they, continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart. Allow me to read that verse one more time. And they, continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart. Now notice that this verse makes reference to 2 different settings in which the early Christians gathered together. Did you notice those 2 different settings? There was first where? The temple. And then there was from house to house. So you have 2 different settings in which the early believers came together. We're talking about the importance of being together. First, they were together at the temple, and then they were together in house to house. The church members gathered together in a large group. And by the way, at this point, there were over 3,000 members of the church, right? We know that from looking at verse 41, where there were 3,000 souls added to the church. So the church is a pretty good size at this point. That is the church at Jerusalem. And 3,000 people gathered as a large group at the temple. But then they also gathered together in small groups in homes. Keep in mind that they did not have a church complex like what we have here at Canton Baptist Temple, but rather they were meeting wherever and whenever they could. But please make a mental note, because this is really my emphasis today in this message. The importance of corporately gathering together as a congregation, and also the importance of gathering together in small groups in order to create community among their members was very, very important to the early church. They saw not only the need to corporately come together at the temple, but then they also saw the importance of coming together in small groups in the homes. Notice that when it came to meeting together as a large group or getting together into small groups, it was not an either-or concept, but rather it was a both-and concept. By the way, here at Canton Baptist Temple, we also believe that both are important. It is important for us to worship together as a church family, corporately, but then it is also important for us to be in smaller groups. Now, we meet together in smaller groups here at Canton Baptist Temple in what we call adult Bible fellowships. They meet on Sunday mornings at 9 o'clock, and we also have a Saturday evening ABF class that meets at 6 o'clock. And then we meet together corporately as a church family to worship at 10:15. That's where you are right now, just in case you didn't know, all right? You're in the 10:15 hour. Now, just like the early church, we too here at Canton Baptist Temple believe that both are important and neither should be ignored. In a minute, I want to give you some reasons why you need to meet together in a small group and why that's important. But before I do that, I want to give you an incredible stat. Some time ago, Tom Rainer, who is the CEO of Lifeway Christian Resources, he did a research project where he surveyed members who had joined a church 5 years earlier. All right? So this is a survey of church members who had joined the church not 40, 50 years ago, but had joined the church 5 years earlier. What he found was astounding, and here are the stats. More than 83% of those people who became a part of a smaller group were still active in their church. 83% of those who had identified they had become a part of a smaller group within that church, they were still active 5 years later in their local church. But only 16%, and notice the difference in the numbers, only 16% of those who attended worship services only were still attending church after 5 years. Now, his research stresses the importance of church members getting connected and getting involved in small groups. Those who commit themselves to a smaller group tend to stay longer in a local church. Attending the corporate church service like what you are in here right now is very, very important. It's a great thing that you are here today for this 10:15 worship service. But being a part of a small group is even better. It's not just good enough to be in one or the other, but we find here in Acts chapter 2 that the pattern or the template of the New Testament church is that they saw the importance of the large group meeting at the temple, but they also understood the importance of meeting in smaller groups.